This episode is brought to you by Roundtable Group, the experts on experts. We've been connecting attorneys with experts for over 25 years. Find out more at roundtablegroup.com.
Welcome to Discussions at the Roundtable. I'm your host, Noah Ballmer, and today's guest is Vicky Oyomba. Miss Oyomba is the founder of VO, a full-service marketing consultancy. With over 15 years in advertising, she has helped propel a variety of clients ranging from Fortune 500 members to boutiques. Miss Oyomba holds a master's in advertising from Syracuse University. Miss Oyomba, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Let's jump right into it. So social media, right? It can be a valuable tool, but also a potential minefield. What are the platforms that expert witnesses are using, and what are the platforms that they should be using?
So I think obviously the main one is LinkedIn. It is the world's largest professional network. It makes a lot of sense. But I do think an emerging platform for expert witnesses would be TikTok. I've seen a lot of conversation there, especially as of late. I think, it obviously has this perception as somewhere for really young people doing dances and tapping into trends. But today, I think the platform has really evolved. It's a place where you can learn. It's a place that's becoming very much like a search engine, if you will. And so I think it's a great place for experts to be. I know during the Johnny Depp trial, during the Britney Spears trial, there were a lot of lawyers actually and expert witnesses talking about different elements of the cases and educating the users on the app about different elements to look out for. And I thought it was really insightful to see, these people with so much wisdom and so much knowledge kind of sharing that on these social media platforms.
When people think about social media in general, I know people think about, pictures of their cat and their family and really their kind of private life, but publicly. Tell me about separating your professional life out from your private life on social media platforms.
Well, I think it depends on the platform. So I think, we're talking about expert witnesses specifically, and I think, we should focus on LinkedIn today. I would argue that LinkedIn has really gone from this place where you could only show your work self to this place where you can really bring your whole self. So I really think for everybody who is on the platform, it's about striking that right balance between how much do I want to share personally, how much do I feel comfortable sharing personally, and how do I tie that in or align that with my personal self. So I think it's really a personal choice for everybody. But I do think, there are limits to, I think, how personal you can get, I would argue.
Tell me about some of those limits. If you're consulting for an expert witness and you're setting them up, they don't use social media really. What are the kinds of things they should be putting on LinkedIn, and what are the things that they should be avoiding?
Well, I think, there are quite a few things that fall into this category. Number one, I would argue, is a lot of politics. So I think that can be a little bit tricky. And I say that to folks who might be using LinkedIn as a way to connect with potential clients or put their expertise out there. Clients have biases or personal opinions. So we really want to make sure you're not falling into any one of those buckets, because that could very much exclude you from potential opportunities. So I would say that would be number one. And I think number two is really kind of watching what you say and how you say it. I think respect goes a very long way, and leaving room for others to have opinions, even if you might not agree. So I would say those are two very big ones. And I think the last one would really be, avoiding misleading people or sharing misleading content.
What do you mean by misleading content?
So for example, we've all seen those like clickbait ads, right? Or clickbait content, which don't really contain exactly what they advertised. So I think for experts, it's being clear and transparent about what it is they're sharing, what their point of view might be, what they agree with, what they might not agree with, how much of it have they contribute if it's something that they've written. So I think a lot of these pieces are important for people to think about.
When a potential client is considering a person who is on LinkedIn, do they research that same person on other social networks to look for things like that? So in other words, if they have a fairly antiseptic LinkedIn profile, are they also going to check them out on Facebook, for instance, and TikTok, wherever else, Instagram, and see what they're really like? And is that something that that you should be worried about?
I think that it would be very important for us experts, especially, to be cautious about what they're posting for this reason. It's not that everybody is doing it, it's just that you don't know who is going to be doing that. And so I think it's important to make sure you have your I's dotted and your T's crossed in this area, because everybody is on social media now, and so I think it has become part of of the vetting process to look through how folks are presenting themselves on social media and understand if there are any issues with how that aligns with your personal company values.
Once you've been on social media for a long time, and say you are just starting to use LinkedIn, or you're just you're looking for a new job or something like that, does it behoove the expert to go back through their older posts on other social channels and either make them private, or maybe delete some things that might be controversial? In other words, do you need to go back and kind of clean up your older posts from 10, 15 years ago or longer?
Absolutely. It's actually something that I recommend everybody does, regardless of whether you're an expert on social media, at least once a year. I think it's important to go back and understand, what is aligning with the personal and professional brand I want to portray and what no longer fits with that, and making sure that you're able to edit those things out. Everybody evolves. We all know this. So I think it is an important exercise. And I think, especially for experts who are looking to strengthen their presence on social media, on LinkedIn, I think it only makes sense to show up, and put your best foot forward. And I think that's definitely part of it.
So we've talked about, some of the things that you should not be doing. Let's talk about the things that you should be doing. How active do you need to be? Do you need to be posting something every single day? What do you recommend that expert witnesses do, and how often should they be engaging?
Well, I think the first thing that everybody should do when they're on LinkedIn is look at their profile and kind of understand, is it complete? Have you filled out all the different pieces? A complete profile is very, very important because it increases your discoverability. And typically on LinkedIn, your profile will rank higher in search results and even in Google search results if it's fully complete. It also is great for people who are looking for more opportunities, because members with complete profiles will often get 40 times more opportunities. So I think it's important to make sure that you filled out all the different buckets on your profile. And then I would say, the next piece is content. So I think, when you think about your profile, it's kind of like that first impression. You should really make it count. You wouldn't show up to an interview half dressed. You should really apply that concept to your LinkedIn profile. And then I think, your content is kind of like when you've got the job and now you really have to perform. And so I think activity is extremely important. So on LinkedIn, for example, how active you are really helps the algorithm understand whether it should be showing your content to people, showing your profile to people. So the more active you are, whether you're liking content, commenting on content, sharing content, the more likely LinkedIn is to show your profile to other people, show your content to other people. And so it just makes you more visible on the platform.
Let's talk about the profile a little bit more specifically. What are the things that people neglect to do? What are the most important aspects of your profile on LinkedIn?
So I would argue that it is the headline, your summary, and your work experience. So I would argue those are also maybe the most difficult pieces to fill out, because they do take a little bit of thought and you do have to kind of be intentional about what you want to say. But I would argue that they are the most impactful pieces on your profile. And it really also helps with SEO. So when people are searching for specific things, what you write in these sections pop up in those search results. So I would argue those are three things that people don't love to do and they tend to put off, but are very, very important. And then I would say like the second piece are your profile photos and your headline photos. So, I think for profile photos, I've seen all manners of profile photos. And I do think that there is room to kind of capture something that is in focus, that people can really see who you are. And I think background photos also help your profile stand out a little bit more.
When you're talking about the background photos, do you mean the kind of banner at the top?
Exactly. Yeah. Like that
Gotcha.
cover photo right behind your profile picture.
What are some of the strategies that you recommend in writing your summary and your tagline? So people
I
have a
would,
difficult time. I'm sorry. Some people have a difficult time talking about themselves in that way. So
I
what
would I would argue, yes, it can be a little bit difficult. I will say one of the most important things, especially for your headline, is really making sure that you are kind of presenting an elevator pitch of who you are, making something short, sweet, and memorable so that people understand exactly what you do or exactly what you offer. And this is especially important because it's actually one of the first things that people see on your profile, and it shows up next to your name in your LinkedIn search results. So I think this is very important because it's a very quick connection for people who don't know you to understand what you do and what you can offer them.
And how about the summary section where you kind of you talk about yourself more in depth? It kind of reads a little bit like a prose resume a lot of the time.
I do think folks should try to cut that piece down to maybe like, one paragraph, maybe two. And I think it's important for people to think about a couple of different things. The first one is really who your target audience is. So, if, for example, if you're, an expert witness, and maybe you want to ensure that you are doing expert witnessing full time, and so you're hunting for new opportunities, you want to speak to lawyers. So target your summary to lawyers. So the first one is really speak to a target audience that you want to reach. Making that first sentence count is really, really important because people don't read. So really including the one key takeaway you would want if they didn't read anything else in that first sentence. And then I think the last one would really be like including a story or an anecdote that is memorable, so that when they've read your profile they have one or two things to take away. It's really like a key story of how you were able to transform something or change an impact on the case. I think that's very important.
Let's you mentioned SEO a moment ago. For those people who aren't super hip to the internet, let's talk about search engine optimization, what that means, and some of the strategies that people can use in their social media profiles to enhance SEO.
Yeah, so SEO is search engine optimization. And so a lot of social media profiles actually pop up in Google searches. And it's kind of similar to how social media platforms like LinkedIn kind of provide search results to their users. So it's really kind of keywords that indicate to people, specific categories that you might fall into. So, for example, if I'm on LinkedIn and I'm searching for, best practices on body language, because I'm an expert witness, and that's really important to how I show up in the courtroom. People's profiles who are specifically talking about body language and the different elements of that will pop up along with body language experts or, things of that nature. So it's really important in terms of how people search on the internet, and the way expert witnesses can kind of include this in their profiles or in their content is really understanding what keywords speak to topics that they want to talk about, or what keywords align with what they want to be known for.
How do you go about implementing or including some of those keywords without it seeming phony, like you're just trying to inject, words at random and, sounding like chat GPT or something like that?
Well, I think on your profile, or especially in your summary, you can have a specialty section at the end of it. So you can use that to add some keywords that really tie back to your expertise. And I think also when you are writing your summary, or not summary, excuse me, when you are writing your headline, if you can get a couple of keywords in there, that's really key. And then in your work experience, you have, so many opportunities to include those, whether you're doing bullet points or paragraphs for each role that you've held. I think that's another great opportunity to try to work some of those in.
When you mentioned earlier about engaging and writing and posting, are those searchable on LinkedIn? In other words, if I like something or I follow some person, is that information available to other people? And the follow up to that is, should you be careful about the things that you like and follow, even if it's not something that you're directly saying?
Yes, yes to both of these questions. The first one is around liking content. So, for example, if I was on LinkedIn and I just posted about body language, and specifically I was talking about the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case, to bring it back to an earlier example, I have posted this post, and one of my connections, let's say her name is Jennifer. Jennifer has liked my post about this body language insight that I have. In Jennifer's network, a lot of her connections might see that Jennifer liked this post. And so LinkedIn does use the content that you engage with to show other people that they think it might be relevant to. So I think it is very important to be intentional about what content you are interacting and engaging with on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn will show your post to other people, whether it's a comment or a like.
I want to ask you about a couple extreme ends of the scale. And one is somebody without lots of experience. Maybe they're fresh out of school, or they just haven't been doing a lot of things for a long time. Maybe they're young. How do they go about making their LinkedIn profile seem complete enough that they can be an expert without seeming too sparse? If you just don't have, a million degrees and certifications, and maybe you're just getting into it, how can you kind of pad it out in a way that still conveys, what it is that you do as an expert witness?
I think one of the best things to do is that featured content bucket. I think here you can highlight a lot of, whether it's projects you've worked on, articles you've authored, white papers you might have done. So it might not necessarily relate back to job experience quite yet, but a lot of those pieces are relevant to the field that they might want to get into. So I think that's a great place to highlight some of the content that they might not necessarily have for work experience, but they could show that is relevant. So I think that's a great place. And then another area I think could work really well is the accomplishments piece. So I know when folks are studying, or they've had some internship experience, or even very little work experience, they have been able to accomplish certain things. So I would argue that that would be a great place to place those items. And then one last piece I think could be helpful is for people who haven't had as much work experience, it could just be one or two. I think highlighting the impact you've had in that experience is the best way to go about it. So less about responsibilities included, more about, led a campaign that resulted in X%. So I think talking about your experience in tangible ways that show growth and success is very helpful and could be bulleted so you can keep it short and sweet.
The other end of the spectrum is something that I run into a lot when I'm bringing on a new guest for discussions at the roundtable, which is when they have so much information, they've done so many things and published so many books and articles and papers and have 10 degrees and 40 certifications. How do you pare that down to make it digestible for somebody who might want to engage you?
I love that. And also, imagine having that problem. Usually it's the other way around. That's
Sure.
a really great problem to have. I would say one thing that I think would work really well is creating some kind of document that kind of encapsulates all of these experiences. So again, that featured content document can be a really good spot. Let's say you have 40 accreditations and 10 awards. Those can be 2 featured content pieces and a really nice packaged PDF that's branded that talks about all of these things. So 2 places that people can go and consume that content in totality if needed. I do think another great piece is to just whittle it down to the expertise you think is relevant at the time. I think it's important to edit. And so if you wanted to be known for the top 5 skill sets or top 5 accreditations, what would you put down and use that as a guiding point?
Let's shift gears for a minute and talk about kind of style, appearance, demeanor, not necessarily the content, but the way in which you present it. You mentioned earlier that it is, upon each individual to decide whether or not they want to mingle their personal lives into their professional lives on social media networks. How important is it that they maintain at least a bit of a businessy kind of more formal demeanor, or can you just kind of be your casual self even when you're posting about something that is within the realm of your expertise?
I will say it might depend on industry. So, I'm from the ad industry. We're very casual over here, but I do know for certain industries, being more professional is kind of the norm and tends to be required. So I do think it depends on the industry, but I always recommend that people are 50% professional and then the other 50% can be casual. I say this because I think, everybody kind of has a work self, if you will, and then who they are behind closed doors can be a little bit more casual, a little more friendly, what have you. So I do recommend that folks try to be professional and then sprinkle in their personality as they go along. I think that's the best strategy because you never know if you're meeting somebody who is a bit more conservative. And so I think, it's best to err on the side of caution there.
How important is having, a colorful multimedia sort of profile? Do you need to have a combination of text and pictures and video and slideshows and things like that, or can you just pretty much have text? Does it make a big difference either way?
I think it's the substance of the content because at the end of the day, that substance it's what's going to be driving LinkedIn's algorithm to promote your profile or promote your content. So I think substance is most important. I will say that it is important to think about different content formats. So, for example, if somebody is more comfortable with text or they can communicate what they want to communicate with text the most effectively, then they should stick to that. But I don't think there's any harm in exploring other content formats. LinkedIn, like a lot of the other social media networks, are prioritizing visuals, are prioritizing video. So I think it's important to understand how you can present the information that you want to present in those popular content formats. I think it's very important. I just don't think that you need to shift your entire strategy if you're finding that text heavy content is working for you. I always preach to people that social media is not a one size fit all. So your audience might prefer text, continue with text, and then explore other formats to understand how your audiences are consuming that content and whether it's resonating with them.
Is it important that you have a really big network? If you don't use social media a lot and you don't have like a million friends on social media, how do you go about growing your network? And is it important that you have a large network?
I think it's important to have a quality network.
Hmm.
So quantity over quality or sorry, quality over quantity. And then the other piece I would stress is that it really depends on your goals. For example, if I am a sales executive and my goal is really to connect with a ton of people because I want to shout from the rooftops all the amazing things about my business, a large network makes a lot of sense. If I'm somebody who doesn't need a large network, but I'm really trying to build my credibility and my authority in certain areas, and I think the types of people you connect with are more important, and building slowly over time would work best. So that's what I would recommend. And then in terms of building your network, I think it's very important to be intentional with how you are building your network. I think that it's easy to connect with every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there. I think it's harder to take a step back and understand, well, who is my target audience? Who makes the most sense for me to connect with? You know, should they be Fortune 500 companies? Should they be Fortune 100 companies? Am I really trying to target boutique shops? And then understand from there how you can connect more with those people. And I think LinkedIn is fantastic for this. Their LinkedIn Sales Navigator search functionality is top tier. You can really get very detailed with the search criteria. And so it just helps you find and make the right connections.
Speaking of connections, I get a lot of this person wants to connect to you. And then the message field is something like, I'd like to join your network, right? How important is it for somebody to kind of customize these? When you talked about being intentional, is it important to customize those connection messages?
Absolutely. I think it's important to take some time to understand exactly who you want to connect with and any potential connection pieces they might have. You can look at their profile and see, oh, we went to the same college, or oh, we know a couple of the same people, and I've actually worked with a few of them. So I think it's important to tailor and personalize your note. It makes it that much more likely that your connection request will be accepted. And also, I think people do like to receive more personalized messages. So I think it's a win-win across the board.
Let's talk about privacy settings a little bit. How can expert witnesses leverage the privacy functionality in LinkedIn to better keep the things that they want private private and keep the things they want public public?
So this is a great question because I do think that there are a couple of different areas that people might not necessarily think about. But I will say this, your privacy settings should really depend on your goals. So again, going back to the example of a sales executive, if my goal is to connect with a lot of different types of people and really gain visibility for my business and my offerings, it makes a lot of sense to set your LinkedIn profile to public so that it's the most discoverable. It'll pop up in search results and it'll pop up in Google search results. And so I think this is the most beneficial for people looking to be more visible. But if you aren't looking to be more visible, I think there are a lot of different things you can set your profile to. So for example, making profile edits. If that is something that you don't want announced to your audience, you can definitely toggle that off in the back end of your LinkedIn settings. You can also notify connections if you're in the news. So if you are looking to build that trust, credibility, and authority, that's something that you obviously want toggled on, right? And
Sure.
then when other people mention you, you obviously want that publicity. If you're not, you can actually go in the back end and turn that off. So members can't mention you if you don't want it. So I think LinkedIn does offer some privacy settings that not a lot of people pay attention to, but it is there for folks who are interested in understanding how their privacy settings will affect their LinkedIn experience and how they show up on the platform.
Speaking of how you show up on the platform, let's talk about location settings. Is it important that you reveal where you are? In my mind, this is a double-edged sword because I imagine that if I want to uh, capture clients from the broadest area, I might be worried that they're searching too narrowly, and if I put my specific city, I might not show up in a result. Is that actually how it works?
Well, I think today, the geographical limitations have really kind of gone out of the window. I think, especially post COVID, because I think there is an understanding that a lot of people can work remotely, and we've seen success with that. So I think that that's less of an issue or concern now. However, I do think with location, again, it depends on the industry you're in and it
Hmm.
depends on the roles that you're going for. I think for certain folks, I've seen them say like they're in the tri-state area, so they don't, you can't understand exactly where, but it's broad enough to understand where they are. So I think there are some ways to work around that, but it really does depend on whether location is a requirement for specific opportunities.
For road warriors or people who move around a lot, is there some kind of an option to just put your location as remote or worldwide or something like that?
I think there is. I've seen quite a few people have just remote on their profile, so I think that works as well. But I will say, I think today the location shouldn't be as much of an issue. And I think especially for experts, I'm not quite sure that location is necessarily a requirement for your expertise. But I do think for experts, and especially in litigation, travel might be required to support a case. So I think, in that case, hopefully it's not an issue.
Sure. Before we wrap up, do you have any last tips for expert witnesses who want to improve their social media profiles or their social media experience, in particular with LinkedIn?
Yes, I would argue that one of the most important things, other than a complete profile, is being very active on the platform. I think that posting and sharing content is very, very important. And I typically like to kind of give 3 or 4 key pieces of advice as people are kind of looking to ramp up on LinkedIn specifically. The first one is really picking 2 or 3 topics that align with what you want to be known for, and then creating content around those topics regularly. Like, the idea is that you're picking something that's niche enough that will really allow your expertise to shine, but broad enough where you'll never run out of content ideas. So I would say that's the first one. The second one would be setting achievable goals for your LinkedIn engagement. So this might sound a little bit silly, but after years of doing this and after years of working with both brands and clients privately, I've learned that about 90% of the hard work is about consistency. So you really have to kind of make a plan and ask yourself, how many posts will I share every week? How many posts will I like every week? How many posts will I comment on every week? And how many posts or articles can I write? And then just stick to that. And if you're consistent with that, I think, it can really help. I will say I've read quite a few stories, but I remember one that stands out to me is this business coach. She decided to show up for 90 days consecutively on LinkedIn and create and share content related to her business. And she mentioned that within 65 days, she had brought in $65,000 to her coaching practice, because I think she was working with a lot of executive clients and founders. And she had also signed up multiple private clients and had been able to enroll about 100 people into private courses and masterclasses. So it really goes to show you the power of being consistent on the platform. And then I would say the last 2 things is think about content efficiency. So, if you are doing a video, can you turn it into an article? Can you turn it into 2 or 3 visual posts? And then the last one is always to check in on how your content is doing. So on the back end of LinkedIn, in the post and activity section, there is a place where you can see all your posts and see how many likes you're getting, impressions. I think it's important for people to understand how their content is resonating with other people. And then this can help them understand what's working, and then they can do more of that.
Wow, sage advice. Thank you so much, Miss Oyomba, for joining me here today at the Roundtable.
Of course, it's been a pleasure.
And thank you to our listeners for joining me for another discussion at the Roundtable. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Discussions at Roundtable. Our show notes are available on our website, roundtablegroup.com. Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts or your favorite listening apps.